Thank you, and good morning, everyone. On behalf of the ICANN board, I want to welcome you all to San Francisco and the Silicon Valley for ICANN's 40th International Public Meeting. It's great to be here today, and as they say, life begins at 40, so ICANN's underway. And it's fitting that we're marking a milestone like our 40th international meeting near to Silicon Valley, since Silicon Valley and the internet itself have kind of grown up together. Silicon Valley can lay some claim to being the birthplace of the internet itself. It was just down the road at Stanford University, where a young assistant professor named Vinton Cerf was based while he worked in partnership with Bob Kahn on something called TCP/IP. And from that very beginning, Silicon Valley has been at the heart of the internet, the technology it has spawned, and the change that this has wrought to the entire globe. Think now of the then unimaginable consequences that came from that work in the early days. And so the Bay Area itself has become Silicon Valley, with one of the largest concentrations of technology workers in the world. In fact, close to 30% of people in the area work in high tech. And the region itself drives innovation. San Jose was home to 3,867 utility patents filed in 2005, and 1,881 alone from Sunnyvale. So that represented first and second spot in the United States, the country itself with the highest number of patent filings in the world. And fully a third of the venture capital in the United States is invested right here in the Valley. And a few companies, the names of which may be known to some of you, have also grown up in this process. Juniper Networks, Cisco Systems, Apple, eBay, Facebook, Google, all in some way help individuals and companies connect to each other. And they each, like so many of their neighbours, are harnessing the power and the potential of the internet. Each of them was an unimagined consequence when the first TIP work was done all those years ago. And their companies and their range of products and offerings and their technologies themselves were unimagined even 40 meetings ago, the 13 years ago when ICANN was created to coordinate the domain name system. And so these kinds of unintended consequences are why we're here in the Silicon Valley this week. Since our inception and through the course of the 40 meetings, ICANN has had a very clear role. We're here to preserve the operationality of the internet, to promote competition as appropriate, to achieve broad representation of the global internet community, and to develop policies appropriate to our mission through our bottom-up, consensus-driven processes. We're not here to develop new technologies for the marketplace. We're not here to create new consumer, business or industrial products, but we are here to enhance and expand that platform that makes so much of all this possible. And that's the truly amazing work of ICANN and the internet. Our work builds a platform that unleashes that kind of innovation. The last time we got together as a community was in Cartagena in Colombia. And let's just stop for a moment and recall what a fabulous meeting that was, and thank again our hosts from Colombia. For those of you that didn't go, let me recommend a truly wonderful city. At that meeting, I told you that the launch of the Russian Federation's IDN CCTLD had exceeded their expectations, and let me confirm that they still are. You'll recall they had expected 100,000 registrations in their first year. They now have close to 800,000 since November. And we've seen IDN applications approved and launched, or nearly launched, in China and India and the Russian Federation, Algeria, Singapore and Oman, just to name a few. And this week we'll be talking about the next stage for internationalised domain names, how they move from the CCTLD arena into the generic top-level domain space. And so millions of people all over the world are anxiously awaiting the availability of a TLD entirely in their own script. And we'll be getting in rooms large and small. We're back in this room later on this afternoon over the next few days to talk about how we can keep the ball moving on the new GTLD project. Because that too is about building a foundation for further innovation. We've already seen possible proponents of new TLDs talking about new ways of building their businesses, attracting customers, connecting people through these new internet extensions. And they're coming up with ideas also that we couldn't have imagined a few short years ago. So there's probably a company a few miles from where you're sitting today trying to figure out the next big thing and how new GTLDs can make that happen. So our work this week is to make sure that the platform is there for that innovation and those ideas, and innovation and ideas not yet imagined. And we're going to be talking about safety and security, about the innovations we require if the platform we're building is going to be there, reliable and safe for future innovators. And that's a key role for ICANN and all of you in ICANN, because there are a lot of, let's call them innovators as well, who are working against us, looking for security holes and opportunities to compromise the system. So this week is when you can see in action some of the key goals built into the ICANN DNA since our very first meeting held in Singapore in 1999. Preserving stability, promoting competition, achieving global representation, and developing policies in our bottom-up, consensus-based way. So I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us here today and in this week as we continue that incredibly important work. You're here because you're dedicated to the future of this shared platform we call the Internet. You believe, as I do, in a single, global, interoperable Internet. And if you're like me, you're here because you believe in the Internet's ability to unlock the unimagined potential and the possibilities for everyone. It's an enormous task, but it's rewarding and exciting. And the buzz in the room as we got here and as we started is a testament to that already. In the past week, we've seen the incredible power of Mother Nature and the devastating earthquake and its aftermath in Japan. And our thoughts are with everyone in that country and around the world worried about the future, about their families and friends and the other tragic consequences. But just as we saw that awesome power, we've also seen the power of the Internet and how it can help people to deal with that disaster. People have used the Internet and its myriad of platforms and connections in incredible ways to warn about dangers, to marshal emergency efforts, to track down family and friends. And some of you have been kind enough to contact me over the past few weeks about the recent earthquake also in Christchurch, New Zealand. And I can tell you there that just in the last few days, using Facebook, 15,000 students were mobilised who turned up with shovels and went to work in Christchurch shoveling the liquefaction that's occurred as part of the damage. I don't know whether you realise that Christchurch sits on nearly half a kilometre of silt. And once the earthquake struck, all that just turned to basically to jelly and bubbled up through the houses, through the streets, through the buildings. So 15,000 students turned up with shovels and helped to clear that. And once, as they departed, another internet-generated exercise, the farmers of the Canterbury region came to town with their utes and their trucks, their utilities, and they shoveled all this mess into the back of these trucks and took them away. So we're seeing the use of the internet in that very powerful way. Credible connections and communications have been possible, and they've been possible in large part because of the single global internet. It's an important reminder of the things we make possible. All right, well, those of you who've been to other opening ceremonies will know that I've made a practice of opening ICANN meetings in the local language. There was some sympathy in that, I'm sure, for the people who've had to listen to me in Arabic and Swahili, French and Spanish and other languages. So I'm delighted to be in the US and not to have to put you through anything other than the torture of my very southern accent. What we're going to do today instead is introduce some very famous US citizens, as we're here in the US, who've been intimately involved with ICANN since the very beginning. And I've had the pleasure of working at some stage with all of them. Ira Magazine, very briefly at a telephone call as we were first arguing about the shape of ICANN, a bylaws discussion back in, I think, late 1998. Obviously, Vince Cerf, who was the chairman of the board for such a long time at ICANN, doing some incredibly formative and crucial years. Larry Strickling, who I've had the pleasure of working with on the ICANN Accountability and Transparency team. And Larry, of course, is the co-signatory of one of our most important documents, the Affirmation of Commitments. And Andrew McLaughlin, who I first worked with on a thing called the IRAC, the Independent Review Advisory Committee, right back in 1999 when Andrew was on the staff. So we're going to hear from people who've been intimately connected with the past and the future of ICANN.